Back in 2023, Tuta announced their plans to release a post-quantum encrypted online storage. Tuta Drive. Well, it finally arrived in closed beta, and I was invited to test it out. So what's it like, and should you use it? If you're like me, you're probably wondering why the hell it took 3 years to release this thing. I honestly frequently found myself casually wondering whatever happened to that Tuta Drive thing. No offense to the Tuta people. I did some digging into this, and it turns out there's a few good reasons. First, it's important to remember that this started as a research initiative. Tuta didn't just wake up one day and say, we're going to make a new cloud storage product. They coordinated with the University of Wuppertal to design, test, and iterate from scratch on a brand new post-quantum secure software. Speaking of, it's also important to remember that post-quantum cryptography is brand new. In fact, NIST just finalized their first 3 post-quantum encryption standards in August of 2024. So Tuta was literally on the bleeding edge of this while working on this project. I have to assume that this meant more than a few cases of trial and error, and probably even having to go completely back to the drawing board once or twice. Real quick aside, for those who don't know, quantum computers are the next generation of computers that companies are working on to replace current classical computers. This deserves an entire video itself, but the short version is that quantum computers are exponentially more powerful than classical computers. Due to the way that current encryption works, this basically means that quantum computers could theoretically break many of our modern encryption protocols, such as RSA and ECC, simply by brute forcing them. No vulnerabilities required. This is why companies like Tuta, Signal, even Apple and Cloudflare are all racing to adopt post-quantum cryptography so they can stay ahead of the curve. Starting as a research project and adopting post-quantum cryptography meant that everything was done from scratch. This isn't just a fork of something like Nextcloud or plugging in existing cryptographic standards. This is less like building the latest model of a Ford Focus and more like building the first electric car. The finished product might look cosmetically similar to the end user, but everything under the hood is pretty much unlike anything we've ever done before. And finally, I want to note that Tuta has a very small team. Last year, I got to visit Germany, and they let me tour their office, and I got to meet the entire team in Hanover. Literally, the entire team at that location. I even met one of the founders. Tuta has about 50 total employees across both locations. Compare this to some of their competitors who claim to have over 500 employees. Okay, on to the actual service. Now that it's here, what do I think? Well, truth be told, my initial thoughts are that it's really bare bones. When first logging in, there's only a home and trash folder and a new button. Admittedly, that's probably really all you need in a drive, but it's definitely a bit of a shock, especially if you're used to something more mature like Proton, Nextcloud, or even mainstream providers like Google Drive. When you click the New button, you have 2 options. You can create a new folder or upload a file. Both seem to work as expected in my testing. Depending on internet speeds, I was able to upload things just fine. And as Techlore noted in his video, you can even navigate away to other Tuta pages like your email or your calendar, and the file will still keep uploading in the background without any issue. I was able to replicate this myself. I subscribe to the Business Essentials plan, so I have 50 gigabytes of storage that appear to be shared between both email and cloud storage. Now let's talk about some of the drawbacks. The most obvious downside, but not the biggest one in my personal opinion, is how minimal it is. In addition to home and trash, Proton and Google have things like folders for different devices, shared documents, and of course things like documents and sheets. Google pioneered this, and Proton is very obviously working to be a Google Drive replacement, so they've recently debuted those last 2 in the last year or so. I assume that in time, Tuta will also try to roll these out, as they're heavily marketing Tuta Drive as a similar type of enterprise collaboration tool, so that kind of seems like the obvious necessary direction to go in. For the record though, Tuta has refused to publicly confirm or speculate on any future plans in the comments of their release announcements. I totally get that personally. It's never a good idea to say that you're going to do something, and then if for whatever reason you don't, people keep asking where it is or when, or they get mad that it never arrived. Really quick, I do want to point out that it's a little unfair to compare products that have been out for literal years with one that just hit closed beta a couple weeks ago. It's kind of like comparing a college student to a kindergartner in a lot of ways. But that's what this product is like at this moment in time, and these are the things that you'll notice, so they kind of need to be said. I said that was the most obvious downside, but not the biggest. You might think that the biggest is the big warning in the bottom left corner that says that you might lose your data. That's still not the biggest downside to me, but I do want to call attention to that because it's really important. That might be gone by the time Tuta Drive goes into a more public release, but my contact at Tuta did explicitly call attention to it a couple of times and noted how they go out of their way to make it as prominent as possible of a warning, so I strongly suspect that that may be around for a little while. Remember what I said earlier about building the drive from scratch and quantum encryption being new. These are all new frontiers, so that means there may be some risk for the time being. If you do decide to use Tuta Drive when it launches and this warning is still there, pay attention to it. Keep a copy of all the data that you save in Tuta Drive. Don't forget the 3-2-1 backup rule, which I talk about more on my website if you want to learn how to keep good, quality, effective backups. Okay, so the biggest downside to me, and this is purely subjective, is the lack of ability to share files. I'll talk a little more about use cases in just a moment, but for me personally, probably the biggest use case for any kind of drive is the ability to quickly and easily share large files with other people. So the lack of even a basic sharing function is a little disappointing, and I probably won't be making regular use of this product until that feature hits. Which, again, Tuta has not publicly confirmed any plans for such a feature, but I'd be pretty shocked if it's not on the roadmap, at least internally. For most people though, I think the lack of a client or app is what's really going to be a deal breaker, either from a convenience perspective or technical one. Tuta advertises their drive as a way to back up or sync files across devices. With the current stability warning, it doesn't really make for a reliable backup solution. Yet. As for file sync, at the time of this video, Tuta Drive is only accessible from the web. There's no app for mobile or desktop, and it's not accessible in the mail or calendar apps either. In my experience, regular file sync is something that most people prefer to do automatically in the background by way of an app. Having to manually open the browser, upload your files, and then go over to the new device, open the browser, and download them is an incredibly tedious workflow, especially if you like to work out of the drive folder like a live copy. Remember that there is a balance between security and quality of life. If something is too difficult to use, whether it's tedious, hard to understand, or whatever, people will eventually give up because it's just not worth the hassle. Even for users who do decide that the hassle is worth it, uploading large files through a browser tends to be very unreliable for a number of technical reasons, like the way that browsers are sandboxed, the way they handle files in the RAM, and the way the uploads can time out. Pretty much any file over 2 GB, you're probably going to struggle to upload through a browser, but a local folder or an app would almost certainly handle the same file no problem. So I mentioned earlier that I was going to address who would find this tool useful right now. It's hard to say. The beta is invite only, and for the record, they're not currently accepting new requests. So the real question is, what will it look like when it starts rolling out to the public? If the data loss issues are fixed, then I think it'll be a solid backup option. Remember the 3-2-1 rule. At least one backup should be off-site. As long as you have the storage space, this could make for a great off-site solution once the stability issues are worked out. If there are apps, especially on all platforms, then I'd say it's useful for anyone who's interested. There's a lot of reasons someone may not have a cloud provider that they've picked out yet. Some people are Proton users who don't want to keep all their eggs in one basket. Mega and Phylon have both faced criticisms, and some people don't want to self-host something like Nextcloud or any number of other threat models and reasons. If you're a person who hasn't yet picked out a good cloud provider, then that's a good enough reason to check out Tuta Drive and give it a shot. And if any of the existing shortcomings I've noted still exist when it goes public, then I'd encourage other Tuta users who have access to use it at least to help test it out. Try to find bugs, try to break it, and report all the feedback you can. When I visited Tuta's office last year, I got to meet their head of UX, and he seemed genuinely interested in getting my feedback as a Tuta user. Unfortunately, I didn't really have much to offer because I don't really have an eye for that kind of stuff. But what that interaction taught me is that the Tuta team really does want to make the best product possible. So when the drive goes live, if you see room for improvement that I missed, you should definitely let them know. The biggest question that I'm walking away from this experience with is how fast can Tuta catch up? They're heavily advertising the post-quantum aspect, but honestly, most people probably won't care enough about that to make it their deciding factor. Even if it was a factor, both Proton and Google are working to upgrade their crypto to be post-quantum safe, so it's only a matter of time before that's no longer a unique selling point. How quickly can Tuta catch up to their competitors in terms of features and usability to become a real alternative? Now let's talk about metadata. Honestly, I think for most people, this probably isn't a part of your threat model. Let's just say that there's a reason Ed Snowden didn't email his documents to reporters. Still, it's always worth having all the information possible. At this time, there is some metadata that is not protected by Tuta Drive's post-quantum encryption. For example, right now, Tuta can see how many items are in a folder, the size of a file, and when files or folders were created or updated. For most people, that's probably not a big deal, but I'm told that the team is currently working to improve TutaCrypt so that even this information is encrypted from the company. For now, though, you should assume that this metadata is not protected. If you're watching this video in the future, be sure to check out Tuta's privacy policy and support documentation to see if this has changed. And if you're unsure why metadata matters, I have an older video that you can check out. Thanks for watching. Always visit thenewoil.org for the latest advice and recommendations, and I'll see you in the next video.